Disclaimer: the following program is designed to offend, provoke, and challenge your religious sensibilities. It contains content that will likely offend anyone who holds religion sacred. This is for those with thick skin or a taste for the harsh truth. If you're easily offended or cherish your religious views, please turn off now. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. You have been warned. Welcome back to Troll the Verse, Matthew 13, Part 2, where Jesus explains his parables and somehow manages to make them even less helpful than before. First up, we get the explanation for the parable of the sower, which turns out to be less about spiritual growth and more about dirt profiling. You're either born with premium soil, just regular soil, or you're doomed to be trampled, scorched, or financially choked, which is fun. Then we get the parable of the weeds, where God plants a perfect field, goes to sleep, and wakes up surprised that it's been sabotaged. Instead of fixing it, he shrugs, lets it rot for a few decades, and then burns half of it. So yeah, if you were looking for redemption, transformation, or even basic gardening competence, wrong chapter. Now, Jesus finally explains this parable to his disciples, the same parable he doesn't explain to the crowd, which is odd given he just said he doesn't want most people to understand. But hey, welcome to Christianity. Nothing says grace like withholding clarity. Here's the secret decoder ring he gives his inner circle. The path is the people who don't get it, and Satan swoops in and steals the word. The rocks are those who get excited but can't persevere. The thorns are those who let money and stress choke their faith. And good soil is those who naturally get it and bear fruit in wildly unequal quantities. At first glance, this breakdown seems simple: 4 types of people, 1 path to success, but this thing is packed with landmines. Let's start with the obvious. The people on the path, the word was already sown in their heart. That's what it says. Not on the surface, not near them, in their heart. And then Satan comes along and snatches it. So explain to me how that's their fault. That's not some kind of rebellion against God. That's what we nowadays call a mugging. Jesus tosses the seed in and Satan just walks in and yanks it back out. No resistance, no objection, just full spiritual access. Is the devil running a black market seed bank now? At least he's the only one doing anything in this story. Jesus just describes the losses without any kind of resistance and moves on. Then you've got the rocky soil crowd. People who do get it receive it with joy and then get crushed the minute life gets hard. They're excited, they're open, they want to believe, but nope. No roots, no support, no shot, not even an attempt to help them grow. It's not a parable about development, it's a booby trap. They are set up to fail from the moment the seed hits the ground. Next, the thorny soil. People trying to survive while the anxiety of the age and deceitfulness of riches choke them out. So basically, if you're worried about rent or stressed from a 60-hour work week, that's a spiritual failure. You didn't stay focused enough. Because I guess financial stress is a sin now. Jesus isn't freeing the poor here. He's blaming them for being thorny. And this isn't just abstract. People actually internalize this. I came across a post where someone said verbatim, "I receive the word with joy, but when things get tough, I choose sin." He believes he is rocky soil, that he's spiritually defective, that his life struggles prove he's not good enough for Jesus. And what does a Catholic priest tell him? Not that the metaphor is flawed, not that maybe this whole soil analogy is toxic garbage. No, he just hands them a divine to-do list. Till your soil, pull your thorns, go to confession, and maybe, just maybe, you'll get to be good dirt next time. The guy literally says he's not ready to give up everything yet, that Jesus wants to heal his whole person, not just one sin. And instead of meeting him with grace or empathy, the theology tells him to feel unworthy, to skip communion, then to feel guilty for skipping communion, then to keep coming back and failing until, he finally stops being human? This parable doesn't lead people to hope. It leads them to exhaustion, guilt, and performance anxiety. It doesn't teach anything useful, it condemns. And finally, the good soil, the golden children, the pre-approved. These folks just get it, as if they were born with divine compost in their DNA. No miracle, no transformation, no second chance. You're either the right kind of dirt or you're not. And even then, even among the chosen, some only bear 30-fold while others get 100, which means salvation isn't just exclusive, it's ranked. You made it to heaven, sure, but you're stuck in the bronze tier plan. Welcome to the eternal fruit economy. Performances are reviewed annually. And still, here in these verses, he doesn't address what exactly is fruit. He never defines it. Is it evangelism, obedience, faith, church attendance, general good feelings? This isn't a parable, it's a blank check for spiritual abuse. Churches get to fill in the metric however they want, and if you're not producing enough, you're a thorny disappointment. So let's recap this disaster here. If you don't understand, it's because Jesus deliberately obscured it and Satan stole your homework. If you can't handle pressure, it's because your roots were defective from the start. If you're poor or overwhelmed, it's because your anxiety killed the gospel. And if you succeed, well, congrats to you. You were always good soil, and now you get graded on your fruit yield. No growth, no redemption, no rescue, just a religious purity test dressed up in gardening terms. Jesus isn't offering any fertilizer, he's holding up soil samples like a judge at a science fair going, this one's blessed, that one's trash. In this system, salvation isn't a gift, it's a roll of the dice. Try again next life, maybe you'll be born as better dirt. All right, here we go. Jesus drops another parable, and this one's called The Devil Ruined My Garden. A man sows good seed in his field, just good seed, no mix-ups, and then goes to bed, and while everyone's asleep, some enemy shows up and sneaks in a batch of weeds. Ha, not fire, not sabotage, just weeds. Divine warfare, but make it agriculture. The enemy doesn't even stick around. He plants grass and bales, like this is some kind of prank. And what's wild is there were guards. Verse 25 literally says while men were sleeping. So not only was the creator gone, but his field team passed out too. No vigilance, no backup plan, just wide open access to the so-called kingdom of heaven while the security detail took a nap. Eventually the plants start growing, and only then do the weeds become visible, because evil and righteousness look identical, right up until it's too late to fix anything. So much for you'll know them by their fruits, right? According to this story, nobody knows anything until judgment is already on top of them. The servants notice the infestation and ask the only logical question in the whole parable, didn't you sow good seed, so why are there weeds? In other words, he's saying, hey, if this is your kingdom and you started it off perfectly, how is it already a dumpster fire? And Jesus' answer, an enemy did this. No explanation, no strategy, just a shrug and the devil playing saboteur. The servants actually offer to fix it. Should we pull the weeds now? Reasonable, proactive. But no, the master refuses because pulling weeds might disturb the wheat. And now suddenly we're supposed to believe that God, who can raise the dead, create universes, and turn water into wine, can't figure out how to remove weeds without damaging the good stuff. He's omnipotent, just not great at gardening logistics, I guess. So the solution? Let evil and good grow together. Don't intervene, don't act, just wait. Wait until everything is fully grown. Then send out the reapers, who will gather all the weeds, tie them into bundles, and burn them. Now here's where people love to start spinning. Is this burning supposed to be hell, eternal torment, or is this just execution, the finality of it all? The story doesn't say they suffer forever. They're not tortured. They're just burned, as in destroyed, gone, over. Because let's be honest, burning a plant isn't about making it suffer, it's about getting rid of it. So the weeds don't get reformed, they don't get converted, they don't even know they're weeds until it's over. There's no rescue, no miracle fertilizer, no moment of transformation. You just grow next to the righteous until the scythe hits the field, and then it's lights out. Permanently. This isn't about free will. There are no choices in this parable. No one chooses to be wheat or darnel. You're just sown into the world with your label pre-printed. That's it. That's the whole setup. If you weren't planted right, you were doomed from day one. And the reason given for letting all this unfold, if I try to fix it now, I might mess up the good ones. So instead of intervening, God lets evil flourish and righteousness suffer next to it. Not because he can't stop it, because he won't. He's holding out for the big finale. So what does the kingdom of heaven look like, according to this parable? A God who sows good seed and then disappears. A devil who corrupts the whole field without resistance. A crop where good and evil look the same until the final hour. And a cleanup plan that involves throwing half of humanity into a bonfire, not to torture them, just to erase them. You don't get to know who you are, you don't get to switch teams, and you don't get to ask why evil was allowed to grow around you unchecked. You just hope you weren't the wrong seed from the start. This isn't a parable about love or mercy or redemption. And if you didn't get born wheat, you're not going to hell, you're going to ash. All right, new parable, new set of problems. Jesus compares the kingdom of heaven to a mustard seed. Starts small, gets big, sounds harmless until you realize basically none of this is botanically accurate. First off, mustard isn't the smallest seed, not even close. Orchid seeds are about 1/10 of the size, even poppy are smaller, but the typical apologetic fallback is, well, Jesus meant the smallest seed they knew about at the time. Sure, let's go with that. Omniscience includes the ability to dumb yourself down to match the agricultural IQ of first century peasants, I guess. If the crowd didn't know better, Jesus wasn't going to tell them. That's the kind of enlightening leadership we're dealing with. Then he claims the mustard seed becomes a tree. Now, this is where the thing completely derails. Mustard is a fast-growing herb or shrub, not a tree, not woody, and not something birds typically nest in. Maybe you get one freak plant in optimal soil that shoots up a few meters and leans like a top-heavy weed, but that's a stretch. Even the rabbis joked about this. Rabbi Simeon ben Chalopta once said he climbed a mustard plant like a fig tree. Nobody took that literally. It was hyperbole, a joke. The audience knew mustard didn't grow like that. So if we're supposed to take Jesus seriously, why is he using an obvious exaggeration as prophecy? And it gets messier. Mustard is invasive. It spreads fast and chokes out neighboring crops. So Jewish Kilayim laws basically quarantined it. You could grow mustard, just not mixed in with other plants, especially vineyards, because it would take over everything in reach. In other words, if this parable is accurate, the kingdom of heaven is divine crabgrass, unwelcome, unruly, and nearly impossible to kill. And don't miss the bird contradiction. In the parable of the sower, just a few verses earlier, birds are Satan, snatching away the word from people's hearts. But now they're just gently nesting in the branches of God's kingdom. So which is it? Are they demonic agents or feathered metaphors for cozy community? You can't have it both ways, unless your theology is just a poetic Rorschach test. And here's the whole thing. The seed doesn't choose to grow. It just does. No transformation, no struggle, no effort. You plant it and it wins, which means this isn't a parable about human faithfulness. It's divine inevitability. The kingdom spreads whether you like it or not. No repentance, no free will, just a creeping, uncontrollable takeover. So, to recap, the kingdom is like an inaccurately described seed planted by someone who mislabels herbs as trees, grows invasively like a pest, contradicts previous symbolism, and operates on autopilot with no input from anyone involved. What a beautiful metaphor for authoritarian theology. So now the kingdom of heaven is yeast. Not a shining city, not a glorious throne, not even a vineyard, just a lump of infected dough. That's what we're working with, and let's start with the obvious contradiction. Yeast is almost always a bad thing in Scripture. In Exodus, it's ritually purged before Passover. In Matthew 16:6, Jesus says the leaven of the Pharisees is their corrupt teaching. In Corinthians 5:8, Paul says a little leaven ruins the whole batch. So why is this suddenly a good thing? Is this kingdom holiness or mold? No clarification, no footnotes, just another parable dropped with zero explanation, because clearly we're all supposed to smile and pretend this tracks. And the imagery gets weirder. The woman hides the leaven in about 3 measures of flour. That's roughly 25 to 30 pounds. A small mountain of meal. This is industrial scale baking, and she doesn't stir, mix, or knead. She hides it like it's contraband. That's not transformation, that's infiltration. Once it's in, the yeast spreads through everything, automatically, irreversibly. No one invited it, no one asked for it, and there's no opting out once it's in. This isn't grace. It's a microbial, hostile takeover. Apologists twist themselves into pretzels trying to fix this. It represents the Holy Spirit. It's just showing spiritual growth. Okay, so we're ignoring every other passage where yeast equals corruption. Consistency isn't just missing, it's actively allergic to this theology. If this yeast is so holy, why is it hiding in a parable? And let's not forget, the woman isn't praised, explained, or even questioned. She just slips the leaven in and walks away while the dough mutates in silence. The message? This kingdom spreads whether you like it or not. Whether you know it or not, it doesn't need your consent, just access. This isn't a story about love or choice, it's about silent conversion through spiritual contamination. First it was mustard taking over the garden, now it's leaven infecting the dough. This kingdom doesn't save you, it colonizes you. Matthew doesn't say Jesus always spoke in parables, just that he wasn't speaking to this specific crowd without them. And that's a huge difference. This isn't about teaching style, it's about targeted obfuscation. Why this crowd? Because these are his own people, the hometown multitudes, the ones who should get it but don't. So instead of explaining anything, he drops similes like landmines and walks away. So who are the them it's talking about here? Let's back up to verse 1. It says, "And in that day, Jesus, having gone forth from the house, was sitting by the sea, and then he gets in a boat." Not a synagogue, not the town square, a boat. Why? Because this isn't a brave sermon. This is Jesus creating literal distance from the people who actually know him. He doesn't want to face them head on. He wants plausible deniability and a quick escape route if things go south. That boat isn't for acoustics. My personal opinion is that it's for rejection management. This isn't the Sermon on the Mount crowd. This is a Galilean hometown audience. The ones who grew up with him, the ones who saw him lose his baby teeth, the ones who still call him Mary's kid. Jesus never circles back to hang out with the hometown crowd for bonding time or casual miracle brunches. In fact, when he does go to Nazareth in Matthew 13 verses 53 through 58, it's a disaster. They're offended by him and he does not many mighty works there because of their unbelief. That doesn't exactly scream reunion tour. And Matthew, because he knows where this is going, by the end of the chapter, these parables weren't just poetic, they were a filter, a test, a way to sort the doubters before the final ghosting. And Matthew, desperate to make this look prophetic instead of petty, reaches for Psalm 78:2 to justify it. But that psalm isn't about deep mysteries, it's a national failure report. It's a recap of Israel screwing up, not a blueprint for hiding eternal truth in riddles. So when Matthew says this fulfills prophecy, what he's really saying is, yeah, the confusion was intentional. Jesus isn't cloaking the kingdom because it's holy. He's hiding it because they don't deserve it. Or maybe worse, because they already see through the act. It's not about clarity, it's about control. And if the crowd doesn't buy it, no problem. Just push off from shore. Once again, Jesus ditches the crowd and gives the disciples the exclusive explanation behind closed doors. No follow-up with the public, no mass clarification, just let him eat parables. And what does he reveal? That this whole story is divine predetermination in disguise. Jesus is the sower, the field is the world, the good seed is the chosen, the bad seed is the rest of humanity. Satan planted them, angels reap them, and the end of the age? It's harvest time. And let's talk about what happens to the darnel. They get tossed into the furnace of fire, and there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. That's not poetic imagery, that's Matthew's favorite description of hell. It's used 7 times in this gospel alone. When he wants to say, you're screwed forever, this is how he says it. Whether you read this as eternal conscious torment or annihilationism, the point's the same. You're done. There's no redemption, no growth, no change. You're just the wrong seed, and now it's time to burn. And notice, this doesn't contradict the earlier version of the parable. It confirms it. Jesus already said back in verses 24 through 30 that the weeds and wheat grow together, not because it's fair, but because judgment is being delayed for dramatic effect. And now that the performance is over, half the cast is getting torched. There's no mercy here, no second chances, no miracle fertilizer, just a divine judgment with 2 categories, wheat and firewood. And for everyone still clinging to rapture doctrine like it's a golden ticket, this parable burns that too. According to Jesus' own words, the wheat and weeds grow together until the harvest. No one gets whisked away early, no left behind garbage, and when the time comes, the weeds get taken first. That's right, rapture logic gets fried right alongside the darnel. The wicked aren't left behind, they're dragged out and burned. The righteous are gathered after. So unless your idea of salvation involves getting bundled up for a furnace party, maybe stop using this parable to defend your escape fantasy. Let's be brutally honest. The wheat gets to shine like the sun, the rest get deleted from existence with a bonus scream. This isn't a gospel of love, it's an execution script with insider commentary, and if you weren't in the room when the plan was explained, you never stood a chance. I've got a handy little table here to make it easier to see what's what here. The sower appears in Matthew 13, Mark 4, and Luke 8. This one's a staple. It shows up in all three synoptics and is mostly consistent. Same basic categories of soil, same logic of some seeds thriving and others failing, but Luke leans harder on hearing the word as the main issue, and Mark includes some wording variations around understanding. Nothing too dramatic, but it shows this parable had legs. It got passed around. The weed, aka the wheat and the tares, only in Matthew 13. And it shows. This parable is laced with Matthew's signature themes: judgment, fire, angels, and binary salvation. Mark and Luke skip it entirely, probably because the whole God plants good people, Satan plants bad ones, and then everyone gets torched setup is a bit much. If this was core to Jesus' teaching, you'd think the others would have mentioned it. The mustard seed appears in Matthew 13, Mark 4, and Luke 13. Here's where things get weird. All three versions agree on small seed, big plant, but Matthew calls it a tree where birds perch, which makes no botanical sense. Mark is a little more restrained, and Luke just reuses the structure for parallelism. The symbolism drifts depending on the author's agenda. Kingdom power? Faith? Unstoppable growth? Depends on which gospel you read. The leaven is only in Matthew 13 and Luke 13, and even then, it's one line. But the interpretation flips depending on the gospel tone. Luke seems to use it as a mirror to the mustard seed, a small thing that spreads. Matthew wedges it between fire and judgment parables, making the metaphor feel darker. And remember, yeast is usually a bad thing in the Bible, so why is it suddenly the Holy Kingdom? Whatever, the rest I'll cover in part 3. This isn't some love everyone message. This is gatekeeping wrapped in gardening metaphors. Sorting, separating, burning, deleting. The kingdom of heaven doesn't save you, it classifies you. From the moment the seed hits the dirt, your fate's already sealed. So, yeah, like, comment, subscribe. You might still be thorny soil or unauthorized wheat, but at least now you know how the firewood gets picked.